Most schools are still running a factory model of education in a world that desperately needs studios and labs and micro communities. We cram 30 to 40 kids in a room. We obsess over test scores. And then we act surprised when students shut down and teachers burn out. That's not a behavior problem, it's a design problem. The good news is this: there are leaders quietly building the future of learning right now by starting with belonging, personalization, and the courage to break "this is how we've always done it" type of thinking. Today, my guest is one of those leaders, Lynna Martinez-Khalilian, a former Pittsburgh classroom teacher turned micro school pioneer at Fusion Academies, which is a network of one-to-one micro schools where every student is seen, known, and taught in that personalized learning one-to-one model. We'll talk about what happens when you flip the schedule design around peak learning times and train every teacher as a mentor first and content expert second. We'll also unpack Fusion's simple but radical learning philosophy: love, motivate, teach, and why putting love at the center of your academic model might be the most disruptive move you can make as a school leader. If you've ever looked at your overcrowded classes, rigid schedule, and exhausted staff and thought, there has to be another way, a better way, this episode is your invitation to explore what doing school different can really look like. I'm Danny Bauer, and this is Better Leaders, Better Schools, the original Ruckus cast for visionary leaders who want to do school different, even within a traditional system, so that we create a campus experience worth showing up for. Thanks to Ruckus Makers just like you, this show ranks in the top 1% of nearly 4 million worldwide podcasts. So once again, thanks for listening, and we'll be right back after a quick message from our show sponsors. Looking to create the kind of campus experience students never forget? ODP Business Solutions transforms ordinary spaces into extraordinary learning environments. Visit odpbusiness.com/education and let's do school different. That's odpbusiness.com/education. This episode is brought to you by Play Piper. Teachers know that keeping students engaged in STEM can be really tough, and Piper is here to help. Our award-winning STEM kits make science and engineering hands-on, playful, and fun, so students build confidence while building real-world skills. Join educators around the country who are using Piper to inspire future creators. Visit playpiper.com to learn more. That's playpiper.com. If you could differentiate instruction in 20 minutes or less, would you do it for all your students? Well, you can with IXL. Over 1 million teachers use IXL because it empowers them to use effective data-informed instruction. And you can get started today at ixl.com/leaders. That's ixl.com/leaders. All right, and Lynna, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks, Danny. I'm excited to connect with you.
Yeah, so I'd love for you to bring us to Pittsburgh, I think it was, with 40 kids in the classroom. And can you tell us that story?
Yeah, for sure. Well, even before I dive into that story, I'll tell you a little bit about how I got there. The earliest memory I have was actually under the desk in my mom's classroom.
Okay.
My mom was a teacher in the Cleveland public schools. She taught for over 30 years. And so I spent a lot of time in her classroom. And I still remember the feeling of, the bell ringing and students rushing in, and how my, chest would sort of tighten up as I looked out. I saw all the kids, and until I went back sort of to my safe space under the desk in her
Under the
classroom.
desk.
Yeah. Yeah. My mom was, she taught English as a second language. And she taught in, as I mentioned, in Cleveland, but it was one of the worst public schools in the district. It was definitely one of the most dangerous, and it was actually my
Wow.
local public school. So I lived just a
Yeah.
few blocks away. And I think, one of the things that I took in at that time as I just observed my mom teaching, was that she really created, I think, a sense of home for students for the first time,
Mm,
especially those who were coming, to the US for the first time. And her classroom was really alive with a sense of, acceptance
mm,
and a sense of belonging. And I think it sort of sparked something in me at that time. Sparked
right.
something in me, number one, to look at what, belonging meant for myself, but also I think it sparked a real interest in creating a sense of belonging for others, right? So
Hmm.
that whole experience for me then, 25 years later, led me to the classroom. And I wanted to, create not only a sense of belonging, but change for students. And so I was teaching in Pittsburgh at a public charter school. At the time, I was teaching both English and Spanish. And yeah, I found myself amongst some of the best, I think, educators and teachers that I've ever worked with before. And yet we still weren't meeting learning outcomes. We were challenged. While we were at charter school, we were still under resourced. And so my largest classroom was a classroom of 40 students, and I still remember the first 3 days of school in the last year that I taught. I didn't have enough desks, and I didn't have enough chairs for all of my kids. Uh,
Right.
and so for the first 3 days, they had to rotate, either standing or sitting in my classroom. And, Danny, it was sort of a breaking point for me. It was a breaking point because, like so many teachers in a traditional classroom, I wasn't able to give them what they needed, and my
Right.
heart
Yeah.
shattered. Yes, in a physical sense, like a place to sit, right?
Sure.
Like
Yeah.
sit and feel like you're a part of the class. But in another sense, being able to really teach them the way that they needed and provide the needs that they had at that time. It seemed like an obstacle that I couldn't really overcome in a class of 40. So, I would say that changed my life in a lot of ways because it led me to start thinking about doing school differently. And it
Sure.
led me to start thinking about what my role might be in creating something different to reach more students that desperately needed something different. So that was a
Mhm.
catalyst for me, that experience.
Yeah, we'll pull on that thread in a second because it sets up so much of the wonderful work you're doing these days. But I didn't know the Cleveland story, Lena. So now, right, my curious mind, like, did the other
Yeah.
students know that you were there, or did you like hide under there for the entire class period?
You know what? Actually, it's a really good question. Can you believe that as an adult, when I would go back to Cleveland, I would often run into my mom's students who recognized me. And they
Okay.
would and they would actually oftentimes they would stop me wherever I was, and they're like, "Oh, you're Miss Martinez's daughter. I remember you from
Mm,
when you were
mm.
little and you were under the desk." And yeah, I mean, sometimes they knew, sometimes they didn't know, but for sure I think it changed me for the better to be there,
Yeah.
and just observing as much as I did at a young age.
And did you have like stuff under there, right? Were there
You know what?
snacks, coloring pages? Like, bring us to the under the desk in your fort.
I'm gonna paint that picture for you because it
Yeah.
is it I remember when my mom added a light under there. She added a little lamp for me,
So,
and it
well,
was the coolest thing. Like,
yeah.
I was good. I was set. I had my coloring books, and, but I would say, as an adult, I would consider myself a deep feeler. I
Mm,
really, really am a deep feeler, and I can remember that time as a kid. Like, I
mhm.
would be coloring, but I would be listening. I'd be tuning
Sure.
in to a lot of what was going on. Sometimes there would be fights that would break out, and all the kids would run into my mom's classroom for, to seek refuge in a way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in other days, there was a lot of laughter and joy, in the classroom, as my mom,
Mm.
really was teaching the fundamentals of the English language at that time. But I absorbed all of that. I was really taking a lot of that in, and she just hooked me up with the light and some and some activities. I was set.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
you said the belonging piece, and that just shows, her understanding like what every young person in that room needed, right? And for you, a light and the stuff, the materials. That's
Yeah.
true. So
My mom.
I sort of had the reverse story. I was a teacher. My mom came and visited me, right? She got a seat, so I didn't put her under the desk in case you were worried about that. And so she had a proper seat, and none of my kids like they must have thought maybe she was like a retired teacher or principal. They didn't put two and two together, right? So
Mm.
I'm there teaching class, and class is happening just like normal. There's good things, there's bad things, right? Well, one kid, maybe strike three, and I had enough. I said, "You go sit next to that person," right? And he's like, "Well, who is it?" And I said, "That's my mom. Like, you're literally going to timeout with my mom in real life, right? As a sixth grader. So stop acting out." And she's like, "Come here, little one," and that kid never gave me
Oh,
trouble anymore, right?
what
That
an
the rest of the
interesting
year.
study that would be. Like, let's bring in other people into the classroom to see if discipline shifts and
Yeah,
changes.
yeah,
We have
yeah.
our own mothers
Right, and learning
present.
from our elders and all that kind of stuff. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Anyways, I wanted to share that with that really quick, but
Yeah.
your experience in Pittsburgh served as a catalyst, and I can only imagine with 40 students. I had pretty high class loads too when I taught in Chicago, so I know that struggle. And so many educators are like in it right now, and they're leaving quickly, right? As
Yeah.
quick as they can from the industry. And that burnout, is real. And I'm just wondering, like, how do you how do you how do you do school different now, right? Like in what you're building at Fusion.
Yeah. Well, to kind of extend that story just a little bit more before I get into what we do at Fusion, I'll tell you how I found Fusion, which was a
Okay.
pretty great journey that I set upon back in 2012. So it was that same summer, actually, the year after I had that experience with the students. And
Hmm.
I journeyed out to San Diego. I was actually on a eat, pray, love trip. I don't know. It was a bad
Okay.
breakup. I was like, I gotta
Yeah,
get
yeah.
out of here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I went, at the time, I went to California. It was my first time coming out here. And while I was out here on my trip, I remember I had posted something on social media, and an old colleague of mine reached out and he said, Lynna, you got to check out this new school
Hmm.
that my brother is working at. And I remember the
Yeah.
words that he used because he said he's leading a micro school movement. And
Hmm.
I had studied educational policy and administration, and I had never heard of a micro school before.
Sure.
So I rented a car that day. I was in San Diego, and I'll always remember they upgraded me to a drop top convertible.
Okay. Watch
At
out.
the time, I was a teacher and I was like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
I'm going up the
Yeah.
coast. But I drove up the coast from San Diego to Mission Viejo to experience this school for the first time. And to say it, in short, it changed my life that day because I
Hmm.
stepped into this school and I saw something very, very different. And I want to paint the picture of what I saw. First, it wasn't a brick and mortar school. It didn't look like a school that I had ever seen before. And when I
Hmm.
went in, there were about, 175 full-time students, let's say, around there. And I saw these classrooms with teachers, one teacher, one student, and it was pure art form in that moment because I saw students leaning in and super engaged. I saw joy in the classroom. I saw teachers were happy. I saw students, if you could, if you could imagine a setting where students are really like the experience of belonging was you could see it. They were
Hmm.
connecting with each
Hmm.
other and you could feel that sense of belonging. And believe it or not, that day I met the CEO. I wasn't prepared for an interview, but he offered me a job. Uh,
How about that?
like,
Okay.
after about 3.5 hours, I remember of like talking and visiting the school and everything. He's like, hey, I want you to be a part of this. And
Hmm.
so I went back down to San Diego where I was staying. And that evening, I was actually at the harbor and I was praying. I was praying for guidance, I was praying for some
Hmm.
peace, making a really big decision. It felt like a big decision in my life. And I looked up and I saw a boat in front of me, and the boat in the back had the name. and you could see it. Like the moonlight was just enough that I could see it. And it said in Spanish, it said tranquila sea, which translates in English to be still.
Hmm.
And at that moment, like I felt something big was about to happen,
Mm.
but spiritually, I knew that I could step into this, this change, and I could take a risk. And that's what led me to Fusion. And we can talk a little bit about what we do, but I wanted to paint the picture of how I got here, because it really was a journey to think differently and have my heart convicted to do something different.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it sounds like it was another pivotal moment in your career. And then the thanks for sharing that, story at the sea there. That's powerful, right? And that
Yeah.
you learned, okay, be still. Like you can jump into this and you'll be all right. So that's super cool. Yeah, now you're at Fusion
Let's take you to the micro school. Yeah. Get
yeah.
around to the question of like, what is fusion? Yeah. So, fusion, I'm so passionate about what we do. Fusion is really a network of micro schools across the country. And so we have 83 physical locations in 18 different states, including DC. And we have also translated this micro school model to a global academy that reaches students across the world.
Mm,
So, in total, we serve a little over 10,000 students every year. And our primary mode of instruction is one to one. So, we are focused on creating a personalized, very nurturing environment, which micro schools often do. If you're not as familiar, for those of you that are listening, with the definition of a micro school, really it is just that. It's a smaller, nurturing setting. So take the
mm,
idea of a traditional school out of your mind. It's intentionally built and designed to ensure that students feel seen and known and heard. So oftentimes, micro schools will cap enrollment at about 150 students. And I like to sort of define them as incubators of innovation, because you can do so much in these micro school environments. You can try
sure.
things and shift and change. And so, I think now that we're seeing more micro schools than ever before, it kind of points back at the need to do things differently. And
Hmm.
so at Fusion, that's exactly, what we do. We're pioneers in the micro school movement. We were started in 1989 is when we were founded, by Michelle Rose Gilman. And she saw the possibility of doing something different based on the needs that students had, and the fact that they weren't being served in the traditional school setting. And we can talk a little bit more about how we got here, but Fusion and the way that we've created the environments and the way students learn is completely reimagining education the way we know of it in a traditional setting.
Yeah, and that aligns, 100% with sort of the point of view I like to share on this show, right? That Ruckus Makers do school different. That's about reimagining what's possible, even within a traditional setting, so that you create a campus experience worth showing up for.
I
I know
mean,
you told me on the pre-call that like your day to day is shaking things up, right?
yeah.
Which is awesome. But what does that mean? What does it look like to shake things up on a day to day basis?
Yeah. I mean, well, so if you are familiar with fusion at all, we have this phrasing that we use that says we change everything. It changes everything. And truly, I will say, like, that is the case. We came up with that phrasing based on stories that we harvested from families and professionals that refer students and families to fusion. And it starts really, I think that change starts with the student parent relationship, right? So
Mhm.
we changed things up because all of a sudden, families who, were looking for hope in their school environment, they were looking for a new option or other options for their children. They come to Fusion and they can see something that they had never imagined before.
Hmm.
And so they step into our doors, and what they see there is, I'll start again with that one to one model. So that changes the way that we instruct. We focus
Mhm.
on personalized learning. and ensuring that our delivery of instruction is customized to the needs of students and the interests of students. And we also focus, these cornerstones of our academic model, personalization, and then next is mastery. So we do focus on mastery. We ensure that students don't move on in a particular area of content unless they master some of those outcomes, learning outcomes. And so that may require that we spend a little bit more time with students. And for
Mm,
others, we can go and speed it up and get past some of those outcomes a little bit faster. And then the third, I think, cornerstone that I want to mention from our academic environment, which really changes things up, is our learning philosophy. Our learning philosophy is love, motivate, teach, which I have never heard of a school emphasizing
mm,
love so
sure.
profoundly. But what
Hmm.
that does, it allows us to get to the core needs of students so that they can access that, I would say, higher order thinking and critical
Yeah.
thinking. It unlocks that potential for them to do that. And so we start with love, connecting with the student, building the relationship. Then we move to motivation, understanding what piques their interests, understanding the ways to engage them and motivate them. And then the top of that pyramid is teach. So only when we get to
Mm,
those like first two parts of the pyramid can we actually teach the student, and we see remarkable outcomes, transformational outcomes. So there's so many elements that I can talk about when we say we change things up. But from an academic standpoint, that those are some of the areas of emphasis that we focus on.
Do you find that maybe teachers new to the school struggle with that framework at all? There, where this question's
Yeah.
coming from is I know in the traditional setting, like it was always such a struggle to give permission to my faculty, like it's okay not to teach this first week or whatever. Build
Mm,
relationships, nurture relationships, create the belonging, create the environment so that all the conditions are set where students want to actually learn. If you come out
yeah.
of the gate, just with all the tasks and the assignments and stuff, the kids thinking, well, does this person even care about me? Do they even know who I am? Like, right? So, yeah, I'm just curious when you get a teacher because, and I'm making a huge assumption that maybe they had experience in the traditional setting first, but that could probably maybe not be true. But yeah, how do you work on those teacher mindsets? Because it's a radically new model.
Yeah, I mean, the answer is absolutely yes. We have
Hmm.
teachers that step into fusion, and it takes them a while to unravel, the training that they may have had, or even the mindset that they may have had to focus on achievement, 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 achievement. And I get it. Again, as a classroom teacher, I completely understand. But yeah, we lean into the relationship driven model first. All of our
Hmm.
teachers are trained as mentors, and
Hmm.
so, once I think they start to see that they can do more for a student, do more on behalf of a student if they start with that relationship first, I think that really hits them in the heart, and they start to buy into the potential of that in a very deep way.
Yeah. ODP Business Solutions, formerly Office Depot Business Solutions Division, has been a trusted partner for schools for 30 years. At ODP Business Solutions, we're by your side to meet your evolving education needs. Now, picture this: a learning environment so engaging students forget to check their phones. Sounds impossible? That's exactly what we helped Belago Academy create. Their secret? Working with ODP Business Solutions to build collaborative spaces that actually work. We didn't just deliver furniture, we delivered a completely new way of learning. From tech integration that makes lessons come alive, to flexible spaces that adapt to any teaching style, to sustainable solutions that reduce your carbon footprint. We're here to help you do school different. And the best part, you get it all from a single supplier, all to help you simplify ordering and streamline budgeting while staying compliant with easy access to cooperative contracts. However, you want to advance, ODP Business Solutions has 30 years of experience helping districts like yours get ahead. Visit odpbusiness.com odpbusiness.com/education to learn more. That's odpbusiness.com/education. Tomorrow's innovators are sitting in today's classrooms, but only if we help them see what's possible. At Play Piper, we make STEM hands-on and approachable through kits that connect kids' natural curiosity with real skills in coding and engineering. Students who once thought, I'm not good at science, begin to discover their own potential. It's about repairing the pipeline and fueling the next generation of creators. To learn how you can inspire future innovators in your school, visit playpiper.com. Go to playpiper.com today to learn more. As a school leader, time is your greatest resource, and there is a real sense of urgency when it comes to getting students what they need right now. That's why I love IXL's Universal Screener. In 20 minutes or less, you can identify students in need of intervention. And IXL's Learning Adaptive platform makes differentiating instruction easy. As students learn, IXL adjusts to the right level of difficulty for each individual student. Get started today at ixl.com/leaders. That's ixl.com/leaders. And obviously, I know you care a lot about one-on-one and personalized learning. I'm curious, like, obviously there's going to be advantages of like really knowing that kid and being able to like design experiences that are very relevant to, what they're facing or interested in, where they need to grow, et cetera, et cetera. I'm also wondering, like, are there any sort of like second or third order consequence? I don't, maybe that's not the right word, consequence, but like things that you learn about learning and instruction because of this dedication to one-on-one, other than like, oh, we knew that it'd be really great for the individual student. But yeah, are there other things you're learning about that
Yeah.
one-on-one instruction? You know what I mean? I'm
Yes,
t-
yes.
the
It's good.
question makes sense in my head. I don't
Yeah,
know that it
yeah,
came out
I
right.
got you, and I'm just trying to figure out, it's like, where do I s you know, where do I start? Because, one of the things that I didn't, mention yet when we talk about changing things up is just the flexibility and the autonomy that we provide students, starting with their schedule.
Hmm,
Our students don't move along in cohorts based on age, or
hmm,
they don't start class at 7 a.m. and end at 3 p.m. Their schedules are completely flexible, and the pacing is so individualized. So the first thing I would lock into there is really understanding the peak learning times for students. I think
hmm.
we do things in such a traditional way still, and it's like, if we can just fall back and see at in the most basic terms, like, not all students learn best at 7 or 8 in the morning, 9 in the morning, so
Sure.
understanding those peak learning times, I think, is a new philosophy, a new way to approach school. Secondly, I would say, we talk about interests, and there is this model, I don't know if you've heard of it, Danny. It's called the four-phase model of interest development. And
Hmm,
and basically, like, what it does, it explains sort of this flow where students are first, they get to a point where they have an interest that it's triggered, right? It's a situational interest. It hooks them. And then they move into a maintained situational interest where, they start to get a little bit curious about, oh, that sounds cool. What can I learn a little bit more about this particular topic? And then it starts to emerge into this individual interest where they get super curious. They start to show, their own research methods. And then it progresses to the fourth phase, which is a well-developed interest. And that is where students unlock things that are super potent, like, their
hmm,
intrinsic motivation,
hmm,
ability to persist through difficult things. And if you think about that, at beyond a basic level, like, think about the role that teachers have in helping students form their interests and
Yeah,
therefore
sure.
forming their identity and their sense of self. Like it's super, super important. So I think I would say, that is the second key area, that again we train teachers on. And then third is just that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is again, it's like food, water, shelter, ensure those physiological needs are met. That's the
Mm,
only way that you can unlock that true learning. And so
mm.
understanding that those needs progress in a way, and that love motivate teach framework is based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So that's a key component that we also train teachers on that helps reinforce the relationship first approach.
Yeah, that makes sense. Love, motivate, teach. I'm curious. Like, I don't know if there's because it's so personalized. Is there like an example day in the life that you could walk us through of
Yeah.
like you know what I mean? Because it's so much of what you're saying again, such a radically different model, and it's very interesting, right? Especially to our audience. But
Yep.
being able like, oh well, if the start times are flexible and they're not in a cohort, like what is it, right?
Yeah.
What does it look like?
Totally. Yes, of course. Well, every student has their individualized schedule. So when they receive that, they have their core content classes, they have electives, and they end up attending classes almost, I think of it as like what we do in a university or college setting where, you're moving from class to class, professor to professor. When you come into Fusion, you end up, as you have your own personal schedule, you will attend class with your teacher one to one, and
Mm,
then you might engage in this area that we call the homework cafe to get homework help. You might be attending clubs and socializing, getting more involved in different activities between classes. And then maybe, that first class started at 10, and then your next class is at 1. So in between, you're getting homework help or you're engaging in some social activities, and then you start attending your second or your third class. And so,
mm.
it really, it's a more, again, as I mentioned, like autonomy and how important that is. I think, that flexibility really unlocks a student's ability to have self-agency and to create their own engagement in their own interests.
What about the teacher schedule, right? Because if the students like, maybe they have a class of 10, maybe one homework help and other extracurriculars and that kind of stuff peppered throughout the day. But like, yeah, are they, of course, the teacher can't be working from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., but maybe I don't understand.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, so many of our teachers, they have different areas of focus and expertise. So there might be math, science, or English and social studies. So they do have also an individualized schedule where they're seeing multiple students a day, might be 5 to 6 students a day. And in between, of course, they have their prep work. Many of them choose to be advisors for clubs or jump into the homework cafe so that they can help students. But yeah, it's again, you kind of take scratch out the idea of what you have when you think of a traditional school.
Mhm.
And even in the way that we build the environment, even that is different. It's sort of our design really emphasizes, I would say, the full palette of human expression is kind of how I like to think of it. We have a music studio, we have an art studio, we have a yoga space, and we have, like I mentioned, homework cafe space. And so students are moving in all of these areas, creating again a new way of engaging not only with their classwork but also with their classmates and with themselves.
Yeah. Can you talk a bit about teacher retention? Because, starting off in Cleveland, 1 to 40, and now here's Fusion 1 to 1.
On
And
the
I'm
fun,
guess,
yeah.
yeah, it's like totally different. But what does it look like? Yeah, to keep high quality staff around.
I think it's a great question. Geez, I'm on my team. I have a phenomenal team, teaching and learning team, who pours into professional development. And I think, retention looks like professional development for
Mm,
many of our teachers, continuous growth. And so, I think that's a key element of retaining teachers. I also want to mention that a lot of our teachers, I think, and may could have been Fusion students themselves. They have a deep love for what we do because they themselves experienced a traditional setting that didn't meet their needs.
mm,
So I think that levels up their passion for our mission. And then many of them taught in a traditional classroom like us. And so they understand the importance of creating something that's very unique. And so I think those 3 levels, both in pouring in with professional development and the different areas that we can continue to have them collaborate across campuses, across, states, and then really locking into that mission-driven, purpose that we have, those things combined, I think really help us retain our team.
So you're clearly doing a lot that's really very interesting in our space. What do you hope, like the Ruckus Maker listening, what do you hope that they sort of take away from our conversation, especially those that probably are leading in a more traditional setting?
Yeah. You know, I think for me, I would have them I think of a question actually, more than a
Mm, mm,
statement, anything else. I think, what part do you want to play in the growing need for change? We have been doing the same thing for a very long time. Late 1800s, early 1900s, we, emerged with age-based cohorts, rows of desks with one teacher in the front.
mhm,
And if you think about, how our students are learning now and the regression that's happening on a national level, it's requiring us to show up differently and think differently about how we're doing school. So I think it would be, that question, which is what part do you want to play in that growing need that we have to do things differently, to change things up in order to reach more students who desperately need us.
right on. Is there anything fusion related before I sort of get into the last three questions I asked all my guests? Did we miss anything regarding fusion that you want to make sure was included in our conversation?
I think, yeah, I think one of the things that I want to mention and really ensure that everybody takes away is how families find us.
Mm,
Right? Because, an alternative environment like ours is super unique, but not every family has access to it. Not every family knows about it.
mhm,
And unfortunately, I think the families that find us for some, they feel like it's too late. But I think it's, the stories of hope and change that I would really want to ensure that anybody listening takes away. For many of our families, the first thing that happens is like the family relationship, the relationship between them and their child immediately changes when they come to
hmm,
fusion, right? And so we ask that question, well, what leads that change? Why is that happening? I think the pressure of achievement, the pressure of traditional schooling. I think the frustration that families have, and as a parent, I can deeply empathize with this, where you have your child who might have a social emotional learning difference, and you want to find something different for them, but you feel like you're keep hitting a wall. I think enrolling in a place and finding a school that can see your child for who they are and understand what their needs are at a deep level unlocks and repairs oftentimes the relationship between a child and their parents. I think that's big. And I want to say, like, the other big transformational thing is just that confidence that students have, that all of a sudden, maybe they were ostracized or bullied, or they have a learning difference and they weren't taught the way that they need to be taught, and again they feel seen in a place like fusion, and their confidence is completely restored, their love of learning is completely restored. And again, I think it's just, whether it's fusion or another public school, or for any teachers or administrators, it is that calling to think differently about how we're doing school, think differently about what our growing needs are for our students, especially post pandemic, and figure out what your role is in that.
right on. So, if you, Lena, could put one message on all school marquees around the world for a single day, what would your message be?
I would say, Danny, I think I know you asked this one, and it's a hard one because there's so many things that I can think of, but I would say the future of learning starts here, is what I would say. I'd say the future of learning starts here. because we see the gains that we do, not only on a personal level, but on an academic level, I think more fusions. I
Hmm.
think of more micro schools. I think of more motivated teachers and administrators who feel a deep calling to, again, approach learning in a different way. And so I would say that.
And I know you already probably built in sort of your dream campus and dream school, but I love asking my guests, right? If you could build your dream school, you weren't limited by any resources. The only constraint was your ability to imagine. What would be the three guiding principles of building that dream school?
Yeah. Well, first I would say, I think, yeah, the groundwork of what we're starting at Fusion is definitely where I would continue going. One of the three principles I would say is personalization matters. So figure out how to customize and get, into that sweet spot of learning for children. I think the second one would be, think outside of the box. It would be something related to, creativity and thinking outside of the box. And that third one, I think, is something that I don't think we talk enough about, which is cultivate a sense of belonging. Understand that motivation for students is deeply, deeply relational,
Hmm.
and figure out where that conversation of belonging and motivation lives in that school setting. I would say those three things primarily.
All right. Well, we covered a lot of ground. We did it. Had a great conversation, and
Did
of
it.
everything we talked about today, what's the one thing you want a ruckus maker to remember?
I think again, that question of what part do you want to play in the growing need for change is what I would want ruckus makers to take away. And I'll just share, like a quick story, Danny, with you because, I was introduced to this art form. I don't know if you've heard of it before. It's a Japanese art form. It's called Kintsugi.
Is that
Kintsugi.
with the gold? Is that one?
Yes,
Or okay. Yeah, go
exactly.
ahead.
So, yeah, so I was introduced by this because my daughter came home and she had worked so hard to put this little clay mold of her hand together, and
Mhm.
it dropped and it shattered, and I was
Mm.
heartbroken. I was heartbroken, and I was thinking about how can I put this together? And, this form of art in Japan focuses on sort of repairing pottery, but they fill it with gold. And so,
Mhm.
this mindset is you don't hide the damage. You embrace it. You have kind of this mental state of accepting change, and you fill it with gold, and it reveals this beautiful artwork. And I would say,
Mm.
like, in a way, when we think about change as it relates to traditional school and what we do, I understand not everybody may be resourced to create a fusion or a one-to-one school setting, but figure out what your role is and figure out, how you can create in a system that, I have to say, I think is incredibly broken. How can we create that gold in the in between and
Mm.
create these art forms of serving our children in a different way? So I'll leave you with that form of art. I'd love to, see us all cultivate that as we think about different ways to learn.
Hey, Ruckus Makers, thanks again for pressing play. I hope you enjoyed the show as much as I enjoyed creating it for you. And before you go, if today's episode shifted something in you so that you want to do school different, or maybe you have a new idea about how to reimagine education on your campus, then check out My Principal Coach. It's your AI powered leadership mentor. It's trained on 10 years of mastermind and private coaching experience that I've had. It's like having a world-class Ruckus Maker mentor in your pocket 24/7. You can start your free 7-day trial at myprincipalcoach.com.